Okay, I'm just gonna do it. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making a fall dress out of this mushroom fabric, and actually this is all that I have left. I'm really excited that this became a nearly zero waste project. The inspiration for this dress actually came from one of our kindergarten teachers who wore a dress that was similar to this in color and design, but actually had black spots on it that looked like this. I loved that dress and I thought I have something very similar that I can make with that. So I came home, found my pattern, and went to town on making this dress, and I want you guys to come along and make this dress with me. So let's go ahead and go do that. This project started the same as many others. I stay stitched the neckline on both the back pieces and the front piece to kind of keep the collar area from warping. After stay stitching, I sewed the front and back together at the shoulder seams. I left the sides open at this point because it was a lot easier to work with adding the collar in the next step when I could lay the entire top part of the bodice out flat. I also added in this extra little loop here on one of the back pieces to allow for a button closure for a keyhole back. I serged off the raw edges as I was working with them just to have nice clean lines as I was sewing things together. This is the step when I add the collar pieces together with the front and back facings. After I did this, I took it to the serger, and the outer curved side I serged down to help have a nice clean finish, because after I attach it, I will have to sew that part down to hold it in place. I attached the collar together at the shoulder seams, the edges, and every notch to make sure that everything was lined up evenly. I just pinned all the way around to make sure everything was held in place and started sewing from one end of collar all the way around to the other side before I could tack it down. After I sewed it, I took it back and clipped the corners to help those really pop out nicely. I trimmed down the seam allowance to allow it to fold over a little bit more cleanly and be less bulky. I used the tailor's ham to help lay this on curved edges, since I was trying to fold this over and press it down on a curved surface. I pinned those in place to help hold the pressed area, and then I took that to the machine to sew it in place as well. Since I had the collar attached at this point, I put the back pieces together and I sewed up the back to the marked dot, leaving the rest of the opening for the keyhole. After I sewed the back up to the marked spot for the keyhole, I still had the sides open. I had not sewn those together yet. So I had the bodice laying flat and I attached the sleeves across the shoulder seams. I left those laying open too until I attached the first gathered tier of the skirt, and then I sewed up the sides there. After I attached the top tier of the skirt, I did sew up the side seams from the end of the sleeve all the way down to the end of that skirt piece. The bodice part was mostly done, then all I had to do was finish the sleeves, and I ended up finishing that toward the end. After sewing down the side seams from the end of the sleeve to the end of the bodice, I went ahead and serged down the side so I could be done with that part as well. I moved on to the skirt and started serging around all of the 4 pocket pieces that I had. I then put gathering stitches in all of the tier 2 and tier 3 skirt layers that I had so I could gather those down to match the tier above it. To make a gathering stitch on my machine, all I did was set it to the longest stitch setting, which would create really big stitches that I could just pull on one of the threads to gather the fabric down. I attached the pockets to the second gathered tier. I did this by marking 1 inch down on both the front and back dress pieces. I just sewed down the pocket and then serged that seam allowance to finish off the raw edges. I gathered it down by matching up the side seams and then the center part of each of the skirt panel pieces, so I knew everything was lined up perfectly. I'm just evenly spreading out the gathers and pinning these very nicely in place using my clips instead of pins so they will hold it tighter. And then I'm going to take it to the machine. When I'm at the machine, I will just make sure that nothing gets puckered or tucked in as I sew across the gathers to the next tier. Just like it was with the bodice, it was a lot easier to work with the skirt panels when they were laying flat, so I chose not to sew up the side seams until I had attached the bottom 2 layers of the dress pieces together. I did attach the second and third layers together, and then I had decided to go ahead and sew up one of the side seams around the pockets. Sorry about some of the shots here on these clips near the end of the video. Apparently my tripod was not locked in place and I did not realize that the camera had slipped in some of these clips here at the end. So unfortunately that means that the angle is not the greatest for the rest of these. After I did this, I just had one long straight line for the bottom hem, so I went ahead and serged the bottom of the hem as well before I sewed up the other side seam and around the other pocket, and then attached these to the first gathered skirt layer. I then marked out where my line needed to be for the elastic to go into the sleeve. I sewed up around my drawn line here, and then in the serge seam line I left a little 2-inch opening so I can stick elastic in. I used my bodkin tool to thread the elastic through, pulled it out the other side. I tied a little knot in this, and then I just sewed up the hole that I left open. I At this point, I tried on the dress and I wasn't feeling how baggy it still was around my waistline. So off camera, I did also add in some extra elastic around there to help cinch in the waist just a little bit more. Last thing I had to do was mark my hemline. So I drew one line around 1 inch up from the bottom of the dress. I pressed up to that seam line that I drew and sewed it down, and then the dress was done. So how does it look? Thank you guys so much for watching. I super appreciate it. If you like watching my content and you want to see more, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment on this video. It will help get it out there for other people to see, to be able to enjoy as well. I appreciate you guys all so much. If you'd like to see more, I'll go ahead and throw in a couple of videos over here on the side. I hope to see you guys again real soon. Bye!